As digital citizens, one of the key things that is important as we participate as citizenry in the digital world is absolute knowledge of the laws, regulations, and procedures as we interact with the digital space. We are grateful for the continued developments that are ongoing in terms of coming up with the Sentlhaga Data Center by BTC. In a country where digital transformation is core mandate to delivery of service, it's quite important that we continue coming up with this sort of technology. But as I did say from the onset, we've brought all the key players, all the key partners, and right now, please allow me to bring in the Acting Permanent Secretary from Ministry of Transport and Communications, Cecil Masiga, to come and unpack the Data Protection Act, the journey of where it started, why it's important to the country, and what is important as the business community, small businesses, as well as personally as citizens of the digital space. Cecil Masiga, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Cecil Masiga, as has been stated. I'm working in the Ministry of Transport and Communication. My presentation today My presentation today, I'm supposed to talk to you about what the Data Protection Act means. And I would like to state that it has got a lot of meaning for organizations, for our country itself in its developmental agenda, and for you, Botswana, at home as individual citizens of this country. So the outline of my presentation, I'll take you through the background where we are as a country, where we come from, and what the objectives of this act is all about, and some of the key features and the progress to date in relation to this particular piece of law. You may wish to recall that up to this point in time, we have not had any law in place that relates to our data that can easily be exploited by technology of today. We live in an era where data has become a commodity that we need to guard jealously from exploitation by people who you have not given consent to. It has led to instances of infringement on our personal rights individually. We have seen that the data processing in this country has not been regulated up to this point in time. By not regulating this data processing, it meant then it's free for all. Anybody can do whatever he wants with our data, to the extent that this data, the business world out there has taken advantage of it and exploited big time. Our personal data has been hosted in foreign countries. Now this piece of law will be regulating against that unless expressly authorized by the minister responsible for this piece of law. So there was no accountability, ladies and gentlemen, up to this point in time. There are many more other things that we could talk to about this theme. The government then found it appropriate to formulate this piece of law, which seeks to regulate how our personal data is to be protected. You'll find that in my presentation, I'm talking about the Information and Data Protection Commissioner, who will be set up, leading a commission, a state-owned entity that will be regulating this protection of our personal data. A very important point to note, because we are part and parcel of the global world out there, and countries that we do business with need to be assured, given confidence that their data, their citizens' data that we may also be hosting, it's not only our data that can be exported and hosted elsewhere. It's like countries like your Germany, UK, their citizens' data can also be hosted in our country. So harmonization of laws is a very important pivotal role that the government plays, and we domesticate conventions and treaties in that regard to ensure our laws are harmonized. One of the important things that this piece of law seeks to achieve is to ensure that the privacy of individuals is maintained at all times. Where in the instance you do not want your data to be processed, used and accessed by anybody, you have every right, ladies and gentlemen, per this law, to refuse that permission for your data to be utilized. Even in the instance where you may have acceded to your data being utilized, you have every right per this law to revoke that consent. The main word here, ladies and gentlemen, is consent. As an individual citizen, you have every right to consent to your data being processed, utilized, and exploited, either for direct marketing or for any other purpose. Say, for instances where it's for national security, and we understand national security, or it's a necessity. Even the law enforcement agencies, they have a clear process to follow where they have to process your data. It could also be instances where it's for statistical purposes. And as you understand, the developmental agenda of the country relies on statistical data being availed. So in such instances, those are instances where exemptions can be made, where your data will be processed. Of course, your privacy will be protected even in the instances where the data is processed for statistical purposes relating to developmental agenda. This law also seeks to establish a very important commission, which I'm glad to report to you, ladies and gentlemen. The commissioner of this commission has been appointed recently, and the process of setting up this commission has started in earnest. So this law also gives the mandate to the extent that the officers of this commission will have the same powers like the police officers, by way of, in the instances where there may be allegations or reasons, lawful reasons for investigations, for them to enter and search your premises, but governed by this piece of law, and any other matter incidental to that. So this is an act of parliament that was passed and approved in 2018, and it's now in operation and effect. Like I've already indicated, the clear objective is to protect our personal data and maintain the sanctity of it. Now, we understand where this processing of data there is instances when it happens in Botswana, and when it's automated or non-automated, but being done elsewhere out of the country. The law also enshrines the powers in that relation. Perhaps for better understanding, in particular the public out there, it's really important to understand what personal data really means. It's information relating to an individual. You can identify where this data relates to Cecil Masiga, me, the person who is speaking at this moment in time, or an identifiable person like Resiva, who has just left here. That's the information that we are talking about. It could include identity number, your physical identity, including social identities. There is a distinction that is being drawn here, ladies and gentlemen, pertaining to sensitive personal data in relation to your ethnicity, your racial background, your political opinions. There is the list that we need to understand where the sensitive data means what. This is a very important point, ladies and gentlemen, important in this day and age, particularly because we see instances where personal data is out there in the public domain being exploited. Please pay attention to this particular slide, because you have a legal obligation as an individual to adhere to the law. And ignorance of the law is not an excuse in Botswana. Now, I was stating when this piece of law seeks to establish a structure in place, define roles, mandate, functions of different people in relation to this data processing, our personal data. You'll note at the top there is the commission itself. The law describes the powers of the commissioner, the commission and its officers, the functions that they perform on a day-to-day basis. And when we feel aggrieved, in the instances where your own personal data has been exploited for whatever reason, and you have not given consent, where you can go and appeal, a due process that is recognized by our law in Botswana. It also describes the powers and the duties and the obligations, most importantly, of the protection controller, data protection controller, the representatives, so the data protections that are duly appointed, and the data processors who happen to be the ones processing your power, the do's and don'ts, the parameters that they must fall within when they are performing these duties. I'll elaborate a little bit further on that. There is also the recipient of your data. We're not only a data subject. You become a data subject when your data is being processed for whatever reason. And then the person who then subsequently receives this data, how this data may be retained and utilized. We note, first and foremost, in terms of the commission, like I've indicated, it will be led by the commissioner, of course, who will be legally appointed by the Honorable Minister, as well as the Deputy Commissioner assisting that person. And this person will be charged with the responsibility of ensuring effective implementation and conformance to this piece of law. That's the duty of the commissioner and the commission. I've indicated earlier on that the officers, upon instances where there is a need for investigation, the officers of the commission will be given the necessary powers and clout. There is no point in having this piece of law if these people do not have powers to perform their duties. The most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, to understand, they are functioning to protect this data that I was saying can be easily exploited, utilized for ulterior motives that you may have not given consent to. Then we also have a data controller. A person could be natural or juristic as a company or an organization, that's the juristic part of it, who alone or jointly determines the why and how the processing of your personal data should be done in Botswana. This is important, as I've indicated, where we are a global citizen, collaborating and cooperating, doing trade with other countries, and they want to have that confidence that is necessary to understand the obligations for the different players in the arena of data processing in Botswana. And then the recipient is any person who gets to receive your data, yourself as the data subject, and then the data protection representatives. These are the roles in Botswana that we keep note. Now, my presentation really is supposed to focus on what this law means. First and foremost, up to this point in time, before the enactment of this law, accountability was not there. People could willy-nilly exploit this data, utilize it in anyhow they so wish, host it in any place, because there was nothing that was compelling them legally to do so. Now we have accountability enshrined in this piece of law, compelling people to observe the rights of subjects and perform within the parameters of the law. This is what this law means. And also, there are limitations in terms of how your data is processed, including to the extent where under Section 15, this is where it describes the limitations, the minimum requirements that are necessary, describing how should be done, and when is the law enforcement agencies, how they go about it. There is that written consent that you need to give, like I've shared with you earlier on, that is important as citizens of this country. We recognize that we have that right constitutionally and per this law supporting our constitutional rights. We can give the right for our data to be processed. And at any other instances in time, go back to the person processing your data and ask for you are revoking that right, that consent. And then the retention, there are time frames that are given for how long this data can be kept. And subsequent to that, it's deleted, and you have assurance as an individual citizen for it is so. There are security obligations, of course. We know information systems can be hacked by scrupulous actors out there, some being state actors, some being non-state actors. So the safeties that must be put in place to ensure the sanctity of your data is assured and the integrity at all times. These are the very important points to note because, like I was indicating, you will see more and more as per the reset agenda His Excellency the President shared with the public. Digitalization and digitization is at the helm as priority number 3 in that agenda. More and more of digital transformation through companies like BTC and others will be seen that being effected in our country, being able to transact online with all this data being present out there, and the safeguards needs to be put in place. Intertwined to this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is cybersecurity in terms of the education, the technologies, the standards that we need to adhere to. We are in the process also of promulgating the cybersecurity law that will now compel the critical national information infrastructure owners what they are supposed to do to safeguard our interests, be it in finance, health, education, food, and so on and so forth. And in the instances where the data controller becomes aware or there is a breach that has occurred, there are obligations, notification that must reach the commissioner to the extent that our corrections can be effected. This is a fallback, ladies and gentlemen, because in terms of technology, things can happen that are not warranted for, that may not be the ideal. But then, there we are. There is notification that is an obligation on the part of the people who process our data in the instance they found this thing, and the necessary corrections that they need to take. Otherwise, this processor of your data becomes liable, legally speaking, and can be fined or sentenced to jail or both, as well as the quality of of the information that is kept. We know there where organizations are required to ensure that the data, the personal data they process is complete, accurate, lest you get misconstrued, misrepresented, and there is misleading of the public out there. And your rights are infringed in that regard. So therefore, an obligation again is placed on the people who will be processing this data. It's an important point to note as well. You as the data subject, you should understand what personal data that is out there for home use is not covered by this law. There is a distinction that the law draws in that regard. So the law, as it stands today, it creates that data protection rights for you as the individual who may be a data subject. These are the rights to be informed. You need to be informed how your data is going to be utilized, how it's going to be accessed. You need to be told in full. And if you do not feel comfortable, you can revoke that consent at any time. It's important. If anybody out there tells you, you have already given a consent, no, as per this law, you have every right to revoke it. If they trample on your rights, you can go to this structure, the commissioner, who will be giving, they will be giving you their lines where you can contact them in due course. The process has just begun of establishing the commission. You have the right, for instance, to access that data, the right to be given reasons when the access is denied. And there must be lawful reasons why you are being denied so. So you can see where the law is comprehensive in that sense, noting where the users can appeal at any instances. I was talking to the fact that at this present in time, you find where certain sectors of our economy are hosting our data outside Botswana today. And this is not the ideal because, one, you are not assured, in particular where laws are not harmonized, when you don't even know whether the host country has laws that protects your data when it's hosted out there. This law regulates for the transfer of our personal data outside Botswana. There is the power of the minister to authorize this to happen in certain instances. Otherwise, it's supposed to be hosted here in Botswana, in the infrastructure ya Botswana. And then the direct marketing our data, Leone, you have every right to you be notified at no cost as a data subject and even oppose if you so wish where your data should not be utilized for direct marketing by the organizations that do business out there. You can appeal for and institute a process or an action to seek for damages per this law. It gives you that capability. So the commissioner, in the instances of violation of your rights, can investigate and address your complaints, enforce penalties, compliance with this law, and so on and so forth. So that's the law in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you.